join us, but maybe we'll go ahead and get started. Um, Welcome everyone to Romantic Drama Contemporary Performance, a roundtable discussion. Uh, my name is Chris Bundock. I'm a senior lecturer at the University of Essex, and I'm the host for the discussion. Just want to start by saying some thanks, first and foremost to BARS for hosting this digital event, and to Rosalind Irving and to Matt Sangster in particular for their help. Also, just a thanks to the Center for Theatre Research at Essex, and for the Center and to the Center for Interdisciplinary Research and Literary Studies, also at my university, for their support. In terms of how the roundtable will work today is I'll introduce the four speakers, and then each will have about 10 minutes to talk. Uh, Following that, I'll do maybe a quick response, and then open the forum for discussion. We'll aim to wrap up by 6:30 British time, and go from there. This event is being recorded, so you can revisit on the BAR's YouTube channel in the near future. So I think I'll go ahead and start with the biographies, and I'll just do the speakers in order that we'll hear from them. The first speaker is Helen Dallas. She is a Government of Ireland postdoctoral research fellow at the University of Galway. Her current project focuses on Romantic history plays. Her doctoral research examined dramatic character in the Romantic period, and her work has been published in Romanticism and Studies in Romanticism. Helen is also an amateur actor and writer. She studied on the MA Text and Performance at Birkbeck and RADA, and had a short play staged as part of the Prototype series in Oxford, organized by Alex Koch and Mike Bartlett, and was the 2024 winner of the Richard Hillary Prize for Creative Writing. She played Agnes in the 2024 script in hand performance of Joanna Baillie's The Trial at the Theatre Royal, Bury St. Edmunds, available to watch on YouTube. And I think indeed we'll see from Helen a bit of that performance today in her talk. David Francis Taylor is Professor of English at the University of Oxford, where he's also a fellow and tutor at St. Hugh's College. He is author of Theatres of Opposition, Empire, Revolution, and Richard Brinsley Sheridan, 2012, and The Politics of Parody, A Literary History of Caricature, 2018, and also co-editor of the Oxford Handbook of the Georgian Theatre, 2014. He's a founding member of the R18 Collective, an international group of scholars committed to collaborating with professional theatre makers to explore and revive forgotten plays of the Restoration and 18th century. As part of this project, he has now worked with the Creation Theatre and the Orange Tree Theatre to stage, script in hand, 6 plays by women of the period, with the 7th to come in October. And hopefully he'll tell us more about that. James Harriman Smith is a senior lecturer in 18th century literature at Newcastle University, where he is also one of the institution's public orators. His first book was on literary criticism and performance in the 18th century. His second book, What Would Garrick Do?, explores what contemporary theatre professionals can learn from past theatrical practice, and was shortlisted for the Society for Theatre Research Theatre Book Prize. He's currently working on 2 projects, one on theatre and gaming, and one on the theatrical interval. Last and certainly not least, Omar F. Miranda is Associate Professor of English at the University of San Francisco. He is co-editor of Percy Shelley for Our Times from Cambridge in 2024, as well as editor of On the 200th Anniversary of Lord Byron's Manfred, with Romantic Circles Praxis Series 2019, and the abridged teaching edition of Mary Shelley's The Last Man, Romantic Circles 2022. His article, The Global Romantic Lyric for Wordsworth Circle in 2021, won the Bigger Six Article of the Year award in 2022. And alongside Portia Fermanis, he is the editor for the New 19th Century book series with Bloomsbury Publishing. He's completing a book on how Romanticism revealed the paradox of celebrity, that public brilliance rests on erasure. He is vice president of the Keats Shelley Association of America, and is on the board of the Byron Society of America as well. So you're all very, very busy people. I'll go ahead and hand off straight away, I think, to Helen, and take it away, please.
Thank you so much, Chris. And thank you all for coming. So I think there is so much to be said about the benefits to researchers of getting to see the plays that we work on stage and the importance of getting these plays in front of non-academic audiences. And I hope that in the rest of this event, we're going to get to talk about all of that at length. But I wanted to try and bring a bit of a different perspective. Some of you may be familiar with the oft-repeated claim that theatre in this period was an actor's theatre. And I wanted to give a perspective of acting in a Romantic era play, as Chris introduced. To set up a bit of context on that, though, my doctoral research, which is now slowly wending its way towards the monograph, was on character in romantic drama. And I'm really fascinated by the way that drama for an actor asks you to see through the character's eyes, to literally embody them. And the 18th century is a historical moment when actors are increasingly talking about how they get into character and want to use a modern term, psychologize character. And if you're familiar at all with Joanna Bailey, whose comedy The Trial I'm going to be talking about, you'll know she is explicitly interested in proto-psychology. So this was a really exciting project for me. Just to plug something, if you want to hear a bit more about Joanna Bailey from me, I am doing a talk in Romancing the Gothic on Saturday this week. Please come along. That is also free and online. But back to October 2024, when Chris organised a staged reading of Bailey's The Trial at Theatre Royal Bury St Edmunds, in which I was hugely fortunate to get to act. I'm not going to say too much about it up front, actually. I'm hopefully going to show you the first few minutes of it, if I can make the tech work. Everyone hold your breath.
Get along, young vixens, and don't tease me any more.
So we will, my good sir, when you have granted our suit.
Do, dear uncle. It will be so pleasant.
Get along, get along. Don't think to wheedle me into it. It's a foolish girl's whimsy. I'll have nothing to do with it.
It is a reasonable woman's desire, gentle guardian, and you must consent to it. For if I am to marry at all, I am resolved to have a respectable man, and a man who is attached to me. And to find out such a one in my present situation is impossible. I am provoked beyond all patience with your old greedy lords and matchmaking aunts. Your ambitious esquires and proud obsequious baronets are intolerable, and your rakish younger brothers are nauseous. Such creatures only surround me, whilst men of sense keep at a distance, and think me as foolish as the company I keep.
There is some truth in this, i'faith.
So, my dear, loving, good uncle, do let Marianne take my place for a little while. We are newly come to Bath. Nobody knows us. We have been but at one ball, and as I went in a plain dress, and Marianne looks so much better than me, she has already been mistaken for the heiress, and I for her portionless cousin. Do lend us your assistance.
So, in the disguise of a portionless spinster, you're to captivate some man of sense, I suppose.
I would fain have it so.
Go, go, thou art a fool, Agnes. Who will fall in love with a little ordinary girl like thee?
You are very saucy, uncle.
Okay. Hopefully you're getting a sense there that the trial is about two cousins, Agnes, whom I played, and Marianne, played by Ellen Zhao. Agnes is an heiress and very plain, whilst Marianne has no fortune but is very beautiful. And they notice that people assume their roles are reversed based on their appearances. So they do a bit of a prince and the pauper situation. What I wanted to talk a little bit about today, just briefly, is something that we encountered in rehearsals right from early on, which Robert, who directed the play, and he was playing Witherington, the girl's uncle, in that clip, something that he would refer to as the Rosalind problem, which is that, like Rosalind in As You Like It, Agnes is challenging to play because she is, in a sense, too clever. She always has a plan, and that means you have to work to find the obstacle for her. Like it's difficult to put things in her way. And the other thing that we talked about often in rehearsals is, as you got a sense of right at the end of that clip there, the constant descriptions of Agnes's plane, the way that she is so frequently put down by other characters around her. They're really disparaging about her appearance. She's treated almost as though she's invisible. And Robert actually made The Plain Girl the subtitle of our performance. I find Agnes's plainness really interesting from a number of perspectives. Firstly, if we're thinking about unperformable drama, as romantic drama is so often described, unattractive women are certainly relevant to that, given the beauty standards of performance industries in the 18th century and now. Secondly, we talked about this in rehearsals too. Jane Eyre seems to stand out in cultural imagination as pioneering the plain heroine, and Bailey is doing that 50 years earlier. But without trying to kind of compete, just the sparseness of that as a character trait across literary history is really interesting to me. We could do some like very academic interrogation of what it means to be plain. But I wanted to focus more on the kind of acting and character side to this and how that aspect unlocked this Rosalind problem for me. So without wanting to be too personal, but I do doubt that I'm alone in this, I feel a lot of kinship with Agnes, and playing her really changed the play for me. I spent my teens and well into my 20s feeling like every positive trait that I had, being intelligent, being funny, even being kind, had to constantly be deployed to try to counterbalance the fact that I was plain. And I saw that in Agnes. Like, she has to be the smartest person in the room because she lacks beauty. That's the only way she can ever exist or have any currency in a space. And that's her obstacle, the need to constantly perform in order to get anywhere at all. There are some really like funny, it is a comedy, they're comedic moments, but also in some ways quite heartfelt moments to me now in the play, where Agnes basically throws a tantrum. She tries to prove that her lover really loves her and doesn't just think she's nice by acting horribly. And I think that those moments where she gets to behave really badly are actually so liberating for her. On some level, Agnes wants to get to behave as badly as beautiful women do, and Marianne wants to get to behave as badly as rich women do. And that's subversive and fun and something I really think an audience should see. And that just wasn't there for me before acting in the play. Like, I loved reading this play, but that whole element of it wasn't visible to me before performing it. And I definitely think the experience of doing this and working with quite a challenging play made me a better actor. But I also think it was really informative from a scholarly perspective. So maybe we should be thinking not just about seeing these plays on stage, but from the stage through the eyes of the character. Thanks. Chris, you're muted.
Of course, I've only done Zoom for about 5 years. Thanks very much, Helen. David, I think we had decided that you might take up from here. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks. I was so engrossed in listening to Helen there that I completely forgot I was supposed to go next. Just share my screen. Okay. So as Chris mentioned in his introduction, as part of the work I've been doing with the R18 Collective, I've been collaborating with Creation Theatre, a company based in Oxford, and also more latterly with Orange Tree Theatre in Richmond, London. And since 2022, we've worked together to mount script in hand performances of various plays by Restoration and 18th century women. And we do indeed have a seventh coming up. That will be on the 24th and 25th of October in Oxford, and then in London it's going to be Inchbold's Wives as They Were and Maids as They Are, her 1797 play. And I'll pop the link in the chat for the tickets to the Oxford performance at the end of my little talk. But what I want to do really, most of what we've done so far is comedies, but we have done 2 tragedies. We've done Elizabeth Inchbold's The Massacre, and we've done Joanna Baillie's De Montfort. And it's on those I want to concentrate. Because obviously, in ways that I know that those of you present already know, that there's long been a kind of critical bias against 18th century and romantic tragedy. They've received relatively little attention as plays that can be performed. They're often considered to be closet dramas, plays that succeed best in reading. Yet the 2 tragedies that we did, The Massacre and De Montfort, in many ways were the most compelling of all of those that we put on their feet. And that's not just from my perspective as a scholar in the room, but also I think from the actor's perspective. And I really want to share some thoughts around what made De Montfort compelling when we put it on its feet in the next few minutes. And there we are. There's 2. They're the posters for those performances. So Joanna Baillie is often considered to be an especially literary dramatist, one who, as Michael Gaymer and Geoffrey Cox, for instance, have argued, sought to elevate the Gothic through adherence to a kind of self-consciously Shakespearean model of blank verse drama, one likewise replete with Shakespearean allusions. Yet I've long thought of De Montfort as a tragedy that's almost balletic in its attention to gesture and to movement. A different way of putting this might be to say that for all Baillie's self-conscious literariness, I think De Montfort actually shares much with melodrama. And it does so because throughout the play, bodies in particular have a particular kind of eloquence, a particular kind of eloquent charge. Here, for instance, is a slide I share with my undergraduates when I'm lecturing on De Montfort. Just 3 examples of stage directions relating to interactions between De Montfort and his sister Jane. And as those of you who know the play will know very well, their relationship has an almost incestuous intensity. The rehearsal process for De Montfort became more and more focused on the question of touch. In this play, Baillie's exploration of the pathology of hatred, in this play we see De Montfort driven to madness and finally to murder in his loathing of a former schoolmate called Resenvelt. And the director of this script in hand performance, Michael Deacon, decided physically to isolate De Montfort on the stage, placing him in the very centre with no one near him at all. You can see that in the first photograph there. There's an especially important moment in Act 3 of the tragedy in which the brokering of a fragile reconciliation between De Montfort and Resenvelt is wrecked when Resenvelt actually attempts to hug De Montfort. So Deacon's staging took this moment as a sort of gestural template for the play as a whole, paring back De Montfort's physical interactions. And in our staging, he didn't touch anyone at all until the very end of Act 2, tellingly upon the entrance of his sister. And you could see that embrace there in that second photograph. So Deacon's approach gave each touch and each movement a precision, drawing out the negotiations of physical proximity and indeed a physical distance that I now see as central to Baillie's dramatisation, not only of hatred, but as we came to see during rehearsals, of mental illness. The space of the rehearsed reading, without a set or costume and without the time to elaborate blocking in any precise way, lent itself, in fact, perhaps counterintuitively, to a process that better revealed the gestural motifs of the play and the almost surgical precision of Baillie's focus on the spectacularity of the body in space. Rehearsal in that way became a kind of gestural distillation. Now, there are several gestural motifs that I could focus on, but I want to look at just one. And the one I'm going to look at is the one I regard as the kind of leitmotif for the play, and that's the veiling and unveiling of the body. Now, this motif is established in Act 2 when Jane de Montfort enters. She's attending a masquerade at which her brother is present, but she's veiled. She's wearing a veil so as to go undetected. And I've given you the quote here and the key moment where she throws back her veil and reveals herself. And it's at a point where Rosenvelt is trying to kind of, I suppose, flirt with her, we might say, and de Montfort intervenes. But the key bit here is that the covered body, and more specifically the covered face, has this magnetic appeal in the scene. So Jane's veil makes her, in the build-up to this interaction, the centre of attention. And the whole scene is structured to lead up to this climactic moment of discovery, of the uncovering of Jane's face, of the moment of visibility. And that visibility is tied to clarity here, the hidden face, conversely, with confusion and indeed with competing claims of possession. Now, it dawned on me, watching the actors work through this scene, that in many ways it functions as a gestural foreshadowing of the staging of corpses that we get in the fourth and fifth acts of the play. So de Montfort murders Rosenvelt. He's captured, he's taken to a nearby convent, and Rosenvelt's body is then brought into the same room where de Montfort is being held. So enter men bearing the body of Rosenvelt, covered with a white cloth, and they set it down in the middle of the room. They then uncover it. De Montfort stands fixed and motionless with horror, only that a sudden shivering seems to pass over him when they uncover the corpse. And then they cover the body later in the scene, shortly later in the scene, and they exit, and de Montfort's left alone with the body of the man he's murdered. And de Montfort is alone, so he's looking at the covered body, but at a distance, looking steadfastly at the body. So he keeps looking at it, and he says, it moves, the cloth doth heave and swell, it moves again. I cannot suffer this. Whate'er it be, I will uncover it. He runs to the corpse, he tears the cloth off in despair, all still beneath, he says. So once more here we have a drama of bodies being covered and uncovered and covered again. And the silent body here being far more powerful, far more present, arguably, than speaking bodies elsewhere in the play. As a little side note, I'd say that de Montfort's interested in the fact that this covered dead body moves had a particular valence when we were rehearsing it, because, of course, we had an actor actually underneath a white sheet who was still breathing. So, in fact, you could see under the white sheet a body very slightly moving. In any case, once more, the veiled, the obscure is what haunts. The covered body accrues a kind of spectrality that needs to be kind of neutralized by its unmasking. Or at least it seems that way, because here the idea of total visibility simply opens onto a new nightmare, because when de Montfort actually looks at the uncovered body of Rosenvelt, he can't cope with the horror, and eventually he dashes his head against the wall. We actually didn't stage it quite in that way. Now, in her introductory discourse, the introductory discourse that prefaces the first volume of her plays upon the Passions, Bailey unfolds an idea of total visibility. The spectator or the reader of her plays, she says, partakes in some degree of the entertainment of the gods, who are supposed to look down upon this world and the inhabitants of it, as we do upon a theatrical exhibition. So Bailey offers her spectator or her reader a fantasy of omniscience, or does she? Because for me, the experience of seeing de Montfort on its feet firmly bore out Nathaniel Leach's reading of the play as one in which scenes of spectatorship, of people looking at an object, most often the body, structure the action. For Nathaniel Leach, though, scenes such as this one, the one I've been just talking about just now, signal Bailey's departure from her theory. Leach writes, in this self-conscious breakdown of the idealized gaze, Bailey demonstrates that bodies are not transparent to the gaze of knowledge. To this compelling reading, I'd add two things. First, that the corpse looks back. Unveiling is an act that destabilizes the relationship between the spectator and spectacle, the body as spectacle. The spectacular body, Rosenvelt's, becomes the spectator. Second, it's precisely the certainty that de Montfort craves and that moves him to uncover the sheet from the dead body, that in turn takes on horrific shape. Here it is the terror of the fixed, of the known. So strangely, tragedy moves towards a position in which the body, it's the unreadability of the body. It's the readability of the body. It's a matter-of-factness of the body, which becomes so apparent when you perform these plays, that seems to be most haunting, not the absent body, not the covered body. So the play ends with one final scene of unveiling, which I won't go into, but it sees the two corpses of de Montfort, now himself dead, and Roosevelt being placed side by side, covered. And in just 30 or so lines, we get 6 acts of covering and uncovering. So it becomes increasingly, this sense of this particular gesture accelerates as we approach the very end of the play. And above all, there's a moment of confusion as Jerome, de Montfort's loyal and affectionate former landlord, wishes to see his father's face, his master's face once more, but removes the cover from the wrong body and is struck with horror by Rosenvelt's corpse, noting its bloody work. And at that point, then he feels he cannot look at the face of his sometime master. So in other words, Bailey's tragedy revolves around the play of visibility, as bodies move in and move out of the threshold of visibility, and often occupy, when covered, an in-between space. So like Leach has suggested, de Montfort does seem to resist Bailey's own theory of spectatorial omniscience, but it does so, I found in performance, less by severing the epistemological link between sight and knowledge, and more by suggesting that it's often best that we don't know. It's often best that we leave things veiled, that we temper what Bailey calls our sympathetic curiosity. Thanks.
Lovely. Thank you very much, David. James, are you ready?
I am ready, yes. Just getting everything going. Waiting for effect there. Can you see my screen, Chris? Just to test that.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Hello, everyone. And yeah, thank you to Chris and Helen and the BARS team for organising this event. Well, I'm a bit of an interloper from the 18th century. I come today with a timer, so I say to time, with 2 proposals about romantic drama and contemporary performance. First, that contemporary actor training and rehearsal practice present rich opportunities for incorporating past performance culture. To put this another way, there's been a lot of excellent work, we've just been hearing about it from colleagues on this roundtable, focused on staging plays of the long 18th century. What I'm interested in, and what I think represents a still largely unrealised opportunity, is a focus not so much on the end product, on revival, but on the processes and activities that come before. Like, the actors who put on a romantic play will have trained somewhere. Were they exposed to past performance culture as part of that training? Increasingly, the answer to that is no, if you work in the UK. Each rehearsal of the romantic play might begin with an exercise or a game, a kind of warm-up. Could that game be shaped by historical consciousness? And then beyond that, and more radically, we need to recognise that most theatre professionals, actors today, will probably never perform romantic drama. However, all performers will at some point undertake training or go through a rehearsal process. Why not have material from the Romantic period or from the long 18th century inspire a first-year drama course, or be encoded into the rehearsal process of a 21st century play? After all, those processes have already been shaped by other past cultures, be that 20th century America or Poland or Russia. So that's my first proposal. My second proposal extends it. Contemporary performance is not just a matter for professional actors undertaking accredited training and attending structured paid rehearsal. Romantic drama, and indeed all historical drama, needs to be put into dialogue with the community theatre group, the after-school club, the Lambda exam syllabus, and more, not least because those taking part in these activities both far outnumber those who work as actors, and they are not the same people as those who go to the theatre to watch plays. Again, we can go further to here too, and taking things in a different direction, think about other kinds of performance work. What does romantic drama say to contemporary stage managers, contemporary set designers, contemporary intimacy coordinators? And that might be something we might want to talk about in the discussion part today. What I'm going to do now, in what remains of this talk, is to substantiate those two proposals with some material from my most recent book. What Would Garrick Do contains two things. At the back of the book, and in an eminently photocopyable format, Bloomsbury didn't hear me say that, are a set of 14 exercises inspired by material from the long 18th century, developed in collaboration with amateur and professional performers around the UK for use in a variety of environments. At the front of the book are 8 chapters, which introduce the world of the long 18th century theatre and chronicle the development of the exercises. So today I'm going to focus on one exercise, Attitudes, which appears in the chapter on cultivation. Work began on this exercise with a failure. When I was reading, this is not very romantic, but I'll get there, reading Charles Gilden's Life of Thomas Betterton, which was published in 1710, I came across something really quite rare, a description of an actual acting exercise from the long 18th century. Gilden writes about how an actor might enter into a character by rearranging their face. If you are to play a hero, perhaps try and take on the same expression as one of the many heroes depicted in history paintings, for example. I decided to try this with an after-school club run in Whitley Bay, which is just outside Newcastle. I prepared the group by explaining the now esoteric meaning of attitude, but all that happened was complete chaos as everyone joyfully began gurning at one another, and it all went mad. I took a different approach in Bristol. Here, to get at the idea of the attitude as a pose that expresses information about a character and their emotions, I made use of William Cook's Elements of Dramatic Criticism, which recommends a set of 13 statues every actor should know. I asked the drama students at Bristol University to replicate the pose of each statue, the attitude of each statue. One admitted that she had never had to mimic an inanimate object before, but then came to realise, as everyone doing the exercise realised, that these statues were not quite as inanimate as they might seem. Rather, they had what Daniel Webb in 1769 once called degrees of action kept in reserve, a kind of potential energy, places to go. I took the exercise to Stockton, where I asked Daniel John Williams, the owner and leader of DJW Talent, a kind of community theatre group, to develop the same exercise. And this was deliberate, asking him to take the exercise and me not to be involved. I did this because if we want to bring historical material, I think, into contemporary performance, we sometimes have to be willing to cede our authority as theatre historians and recognise the expertise of those who are already making performance happen in many different places today. And Daniel John brought two things to this exercise that would never have happened if I were in the room. Firstly, he discovered its comic potential. Some of the statue's potential energy, like the Venus on the left here, could clearly be played for laughs. This apparently became known as the shower curtain Venus in the course of the rehearsal. The other was a set of questions that his collaborators were happy to ask him, perhaps not would have been so happy to ask me, like why the Mao statues had such small genitalia when they were otherwise paragons of virility. Finally, I took this exercise to Newcastle and added in a bit of Sarah Siddons. James Bowden's memoir of the actress, and I apologise this big block of text, but it's worth looking at. Memoir of the actress records a moment when she took on the attitude of one of the old Egyptian statues, then used the concentrated energy which the unusual and ungraceful posture in itself implied to deliver for her audience, private audience, a hair-raising rendition of King Lear's curse on Goneril. As members of the Actors Forge, whom I was working with in Newcastle, took on their new attitudes, we worked out how to speak lines. We asked them to kind of speak lines that they were preparing for their own self-tapes and auditions. Actors Forge is a kind of professionalising institution. And as they did it, some discovered new ways of speaking. The exercise was almost ready. There was one dimension that needed more consideration, how it intersected with contemporary actor training. I'd done a review of acting syllabi in UK drama schools and found that there was almost nothing on acting in the pre-Stanislavski past. One of the only partial exceptions is Barry Rolfe's 1985 Movement for Period plays, which records, for example, that in the 18th century, a sense of lightness permeated everything. Rolfe does also, however, think carefully about potential movement exercises and suggests that actors should practice moving into and out of tableau poses in different ways. I took that instruction from her. Equally, I added one final thing in from the 18th century, Thomas Rorke's advice on tableaux, which was to consider them as paintings. For a great tableau, like a fine painting in perspective, will be all graceful and harmonious. That produced a final exercise here in its photocopiable form, which has a little kind of snapshot of the thinking that went into it and then a kind of 7-step thing to follow. That bit from Wilkes at the end also allows another connection to acting syllabi. His use of painting terminology, and indeed the widespread use of language from other domains to talk about acting in the long 18th century, also finds an interesting echo in modern theatre syllabi with what is known as the viewpoints acting method. And Bogart and Tina Landau, writing in 2005, the proponents of this method, explicitly encourage actors to think about their work using the language of different art forms, including painting. More generally, they also urge anyone studying acting to study everything, a demand that echoes much earlier demands for the actor to cultivate themselves, such as this spectacular one from 1814. I had to cut out quite a lot of that quote because there were so many things it was said that the actor should know, but they include the whole range of liberal silence. And there's a lot to say about that, including how much it's not just an exhortation, but also a kind of defense of the actor. But rather, let me end by returning to my proposals. In Whitley Bay, Bristol, Stockton and Newcastle, with school children, students, amateurs and professionals, I worked on this rehearsal exercise about attitudes in an effort to add something to a contemporary performance culture that extends beyond the professional stage. It also extends beyond the practice of revival by opening, in new spaces, historically informed discussion about emotions, gender, Greek and Roman culture, the relationship between the arts, and so on. Perhaps most interestingly of all, the ideas of the long 18th century, although they started off as something alien, a kind of provocation, ended up becoming not just something strange and old, but also something that intersected in revealing ways with contemporary thinking about how to act. Thank you for your attention.
Lovely. Thank you, James. I see you had a question in the comments asking for some more information about some of the books you mentioned, but we can probably get to that a bit later on. And just to flag up for people that David has helpfully put in a link to the de Montfort performance in the chat as well. Lovely. So I think, Omar, are you ready?
Great. Hello, everyone, and thank you for being here, and thank you to the organizers for the invitation, and especially to Matt Sangster, to Rosalind, and to Chris Bundock, whose generosity has made conversations like this possible. My involvement with romantic drama began in a somewhat unusual way. Like many scholars of Romanticism, I first encountered these works in classrooms, libraries, and scholarly conversations. Yet at the same time, one of the early formative experiences for me was attending a production of Shelley's The Cenci. I still remember seeing Roger Rees play Count Cenci and meeting Stuart Curran afterward. Looking back, those experiences influenced my understanding of romantic drama as much as anything I was reading. Even then, I was encountering these works both as literary texts and as theatrical events. Years later, that interest led me into a series of collaborations with Red Bull Theatre in New York. Over several years, we staged readings of Byron's Sardanapalus and Manfred, Shelley's Prometheus Unbound, Joanna Baillie's de Montfort, and Frances Burney's The Woman Hater. My reflections today build on the work of scholars such as Geoffrey Cox, Michael Gamer, Frederick Berwick, and Catherine Burrows, whose scholarship has encouraged us to think about romantic drama as theatrical event as well as literary text. My own contribution is more experiential. I want to reflect on what I learned when these works entered rehearsal rooms, theaters, and conversations with audiences. As I reflect back, I entered those collaborations with a quiet assumption. As one of the resident dramaturgs, I spent rehearsals explaining historical contexts, discussing biography, helping with pronunciations, unpacking difficult passages, and answering questions about the text. I initially imagined a largely one-directional exchange in which scholarship would then inform performance. But the exchange quickly became reciprocal. Actors, directors, and audiences became interpreters in their own right, and the experience transformed the way I read, teach, and think about these plays. Most importantly, it convinced me that performance can illuminate dimensions of romantic drama that are easy to overlook on the page. Those collaborations continually return me to four ideas: interpretation, listening, audiences, and I'll end with thinking about community. Let me begin with interpretation. One of the first things I learned is that performance forces decisions about meaning. As we know all too well, literary criticism often thrives on ambiguity. We explore tensions, contradictions, competing possibilities. The theater operates according to a different rhythm. An actor must speak the line, a director must decide who a character is. Performance, therefore, becomes interpretation in one of its most immediate forms. As Shakespeare scholars such as W.B. Worthen have argued, performance is more than merely a vehicle for transmitting meaning. It is a site where meaning is produced. In fact, Shakespeare scholars have long recognized that performances generate critical insights of their own. My experience with romantic drama has convinced me that Byron, Shelley, Bailey, and Burney deserve the same kind of attention. One of the most memorable moments from our 2024 production of Sardanapalus came from a line I had barely noticed as a reader. For those unfamiliar with the play, Mira is a Greek enslaved woman who has fallen in love with Sardanapalus. Throughout the drama, she tries to persuade him to take responsibility for his kingdom while he retreats into pleasure and avoidance. She loves him deeply, but she also sees his weaknesses more clearly than anyone else on stage. Near the end of Act 1, after another unsuccessful attempt to persuade him, she is left alone on stage. And I'm going to show you the clip.
He will adduce such reasons as will warrant his daring, and perhaps obtain the pardon for his presumption.
What? Am I then cooped, already captive? Can I not even breathe the breath of heaven? Tell Prince Salamenes, were all Assyria raging around the walls in mutinous myriads, I would still go forth. I must obey, and yet...
Oh, monarch, listen. How many a day and moon thou hast reclined within these palace walls in silken dalliance, and never shown thee to thy people's longing, leaving thy subjects' eyes ungratified. The satraps uncontrolled, the gods unworshipped, and all things in the anarchy of sloth, till all, save evil, slumbered through the realm. And wilt thou now not tarry for a day which may redeem thee? Wilt thou not yield to the few still faithful a few hours, for them, for thee, for thy past father's race, and for thy son's inheritance?
'Tis true. For the deep urgency with which the prince dispatched me to the sacred presence, I must dare to add my feeble voice to that which now was spoken.
No, it must not be.
For the sake of thy realm.
Away! For that of all thy faithful subjects who will rally round thee and thine.
These are mere fantasies. There is no peril. 'Tis a sullen scheme of Salamenes to approve his zeal and show himself more necessary to us.
By all that's good and glorious, take this counsel.
Business tomorrow.
Aye, or death tonight.
Why, let it come then unexpectedly, midst joy and gentleness and mirth and love, so let me fall like the plucked rose, far better than to be withered.
Then thou wilt not yield, even for the sake of all that ever stirred a monarch into action, to forego a trifling revel?
No.
Then yield for mine. Yield for my sake.
Thine, my Mira.
'Tis the first boon which I ever asked a serious king.
That's true. And were 't my kingdom, must be granted. Oh, for thy sake I yield thee. Kanya, hence, thou hearest me, and obey. I marvel at thee. What is thy motive, Mira, thus to urge me?
Thy safety, and the certainty that naught could urge the prince, thy kinsman, to require thus much from thee, but some impending danger.
And if I do not dread it, why shouldst thou?
Because thou dost not fear, I fear for thee.
Tomorrow thou wilt smile at these vain fantasies.
If the worst come, I shall be where none weep. And that is better than the power to smile. And thou?
I shall be king as heretofore.
Where?
With Baal, Nimrod, Semiramis, Sol of Assyria, or with them elsewhere. Fate made me what I am, may make me nothing. But either that or nothing must I be. I will not live degraded.
Hadst thou felt thus always, none would ever dare degrade thee.
And who will do so now?
Dost thou suspect none?
Suspect? That is a spy's office. Oh, we lose 10,000 precious moments in vain words and vainer fears. Within there, ye sleeves, deck the hall of Nimrod for the evening revel. If I must make a prison of our palace, at least we wear our fetters jocundly. If the Euphrates be forbid us, and the summer dwelling on its beauteous border, here we are still unmenaced. Ho! Within there!
Why do I love this man?
Okay. There's a lot to say about that clip, but I just wanted to talk about that final moment. I had never thought the line was particularly funny when reading it. My attention had always gravitated toward the seriousness of Mira's situation. Yet the audience immediately recognized another dimension of the scene. They had spent the entire act watching Sardanapalus evade responsibility, dismiss warnings, and retreat into pleasure while political crisis gathered around him. By the time Mira asked the rhetorical question, it belonged to the audience as much as to her. The laughter illuminated something fundamental about Byron's characterization. Sardanapalus inspires affection as well as frustration, admiration, as well as exasperation. The moment in the theater also drew attention to Byron's tonal flexibility. What I had primarily read as pathos acquired a comic dimension in performance. Suddenly, a tragedy of political collapse also became a drama structured around the tension between charisma and judgment. The audience laughed at Sardanapalus, but they also understood precisely why Mira loved him. That simultaneous recognition gave the scene much of its force and brought into focus a series of questions about charisma, power, and gender. The play invites us to consider why attachment persists despite clear evidence of failure, and why Mira bears the burden of seeing Sardanapalus more clearly than he sees himself. A second example that I won't talk about now, but it's very interesting, is that one of my colleagues came up to me after the performance to tell me that the performance really brought out the quote-unquote campiness of Sardanapalus and the portrayal of the king as a diva. And now this colleague is writing about this very thing in the play. Performances like these also taught me to listen differently. As literary scholars, we spend much of our lives reading closely, yet hearing a play perform reminds us that these texts were composed for voices as well as eyes, even with all the things Byron said about mental theater. Performance unfolds through pace, rhythm, silence, hesitation, breath, and tone. Meaning emerges through sound as well as language. I remember this especially from our production of Manfred. There is a moment when Nemesis asks Arimanes whether he will grant Manfred's request. This is in the hall of Arimanes in the underworld. On the page, the exchange occupies only a few lines. Arimanes' entire response consists of a single word, yea. During performance, however, the actor waited before speaking. The pause seemed to stretch across the entire stage. Everyone was waiting for Arimanes. The audience was waiting for Arimanes. By the time the word finally arrived, it carried extraordinary weight. In a single syllable, the audience experienced the character's authority, mystery, command. Scholars such as Stanley Cavell have long argued that silence, timing, and vocal presence are integral components of dramatic meaning. The performance made that insight palpable. In Manfred, authority depended as much upon duration as language. Byron gives us the word, the actor gives us the waiting. Listening became a form of reading, and the scene encouraged me to think differently about how Byron constructs power. For my reading, Arimanes' authority resides in the expectation that surrounds his speech. The theater revealed a dramaturgy of anticipation that can easily recede from view on the page. I learned a similar lesson from Prometheus Unbound. What an experience that was. The actors continually however, redirected my attention from ideas to dramatic presence. They found wit, playfulness, emotional immediacy. I'm sorry for the background noise. Um, the question of listening also extends beyond actors to audiences. I have increasingly come to believe that audiences outside the academy are among the most valuable interpreters of romantic drama. They often register dimensions of these works that scholars can overlook, responding immediately to humor, as we saw, suspense, spectacle, emotional conflict. Their reactions reveal where a play concentrates attention, where it generates sympathy, where it creates anticipation, where it releases tension. I encountered this repeatedly during post-performance discussions. Audience members frequently gravitated toward the very dynamics that organize the dramas themselves. Which characters command attention? Why do certain figures inspire loyalty despite their flaws? Which moments generate laughter, suspense, discomfort, admiration? What interested me went beyond the content of these responses. Audience reaction became a way of studying reception in real time. It offered insight into how romantic drama structures feeling, distributes attention, and produces attachment. One of my favorite examples comes from our production of Prometheus Unbound. We began the evening with a full theater. Every seat in that theater was sold out. It was about 200 seats. After intermission, which followed Act 2, roughly half of the audience had disappeared. At first, I was horrified. Then I started thinking about where we had paused. The first half had ended with Asia's, as you know, the first half had ended with Asia's magnificent song, "My soul is an enchanted boat, which like a sleeping swan doth float." The scene gathers together lyricism, music, transformation, spectacle with such force that I finally came to realize that it can really feel like a conclusion. Audience response suddenly became a way of thinking about structure, pacing, climax, and closure from the perspective of reception. The audience's departure after I got over it functioned almost as a form of criticism, drawing attention to the extraordinary emotional and aesthetic weight Shelley places at the end of Act 2. Experiences like this gradually shifted my attention toward a larger question. For many years now, scholars and theater artists have devoted enormous energy to demonstrating that romantic drama belongs on the stage. Thanks to the work of many people in this space and beyond it, that case has been made with success. The question that increasingly interests me now is what happens next. How do performances circulate beyond a single evening? How do they enter classrooms? How do they connect theaters, scholars, students, and public audiences? How do they generate intellectual communities rather than isolated events? These strike me as institutional questions, certainly. They also strike me as scholarly ones. With such contemporary performances, we have the ability to create new publics for Romanticism. At a time when the humanities are frequently asked to demonstrate their value, performance offers one powerful answer. It creates encounters, introducing audiences to works they might never otherwise discover. It also transforms Romanticism from a subject of academic study into a shared cultural experience. I find myself thinking about these as we prepare for the upcoming performance of Shelley's The Cenci this November, and I will share the link with you once I stop talking. There is something especially meaningful about that project for me. One of my earliest experiences, as you know, was encountering the Cenci as performance. And at that time, I could not have imagined that years later, I would be helping bring that same play before contemporary audiences once again. What excites me about this project, which now has a formal name, the Romantic Revivals Project, is the audience it may create. Through partnerships with universities, scholarly organizations, classrooms, libraries, and community groups, people across multiple countries will encounter this play together through screenings, discussions, and watch parties. In my earlier work on romantic drama, I described the staged reading as a kind of, quote, happy medium between page and stage. Looking ahead to projects like the Cenci, I increasingly wonder whether we are discovering another medium altogether. We are building communities around performances and connecting readers, viewers, students, scholars, and theater goers across cities, countries, and time zones. The technologies would have been unimaginable to Shelley but the aspiration would have been entirely familiar, bringing people together through a shared encounter with literature. And perhaps that is where I would like to conclude. The most valuable thing performance has taught me is that romantic drama becomes richest when it is shared. Every time one of these plays enters a rehearsal room, a theater, a classroom, or a watch party, new interpretations become possible. Actors discover emphases, audiences recognize patterns, scholars hear familiar passages differently. Performance illuminated tonal registers, revealed structures of characterization, drew attention to pacing and dramatic architecture, and supplied new vocabularies for understanding familiar texts. That process has also reminded me that these plays belong to more than any one constituency. They belong to scholars, most certainly, but they also belong to actors, directors, students, and audiences, as my colleagues here on this panel have already suggested. Every performance returns these works to the world, and for me, that openness is one of the greatest gifts of performance. If literary criticism seeks to understand how texts make meaning, then performance belongs among the methods through which that understanding is produced. It is interpretation, it is scholarship, it is public humanities, and most importantly, it is an invitation. Performance is an invitation to gather around these works once again and discover what they still have to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Omar. And thanks to all of the speakers for this really fascinating and I think a number of the threads have started to emerge across them all those talks now. I just wanted to flag up for everyone that I do believe that there is a question and answer box that you should be able to access to put your questions and comments into. If that, correct me if I'm wrong. Oh, I see a message from Matt. Yeah, perfect. Also, do feel free to use the chat box that you used earlier to tell us about the weather in your locale. If you would like to have a go at asking a question, making a comment, chipping in any way, just to get the ball rolling. Again, I think there are many threads here. One that stuck out to me is the way that I think everyone on the panel had something to say about the way that, and I suppose this isn't surprising, we're talking about performance, but about how physical bodies come into um, your interest into your talk in different ways. Omar talking about the audience laughing, so the body of the audience quite crucial there. James also thinking about attitudes and the attitudes exercise and how using the body as a tool to understand mood or attitude or motivation, that being a way into that issue. David, you talked a lot about touch and gesture in De Montfort, so in terms of the body of the character and how important that is for the play, um, and Helen, you're talking about the very plainness of Agnes, being a physical feature that really kind of comes to life, or maybe that we're forced to confront more directly when the play is brought to the stage. I just wondered if people wanted to come in thinking again a little bit more deliberately about embodiment and the effect of embodiment on how we think about romantic drama, and whether that's in terms of audiences, characters, the plays themselves, and the kind of new paths that emerge when we see them brought to life.
I have a response to this that's going to take it in a really annoying different direction. So I don't know if someone else wants to speak first, or if you'd like me to speak while you think. But in the really gauche thing of somewhat plugging my own other work, I've written before about an interest in this kind of closet drama, or like I prefer the term closeted drama. how the sort of romantic canon of plays are where they are not performed, they are always thinking about the body, and there's a kind of fixation on the body. And to the extent that the body remains massively central by its very absence, it is constantly evoked and essential. And I don't think it's a coincidence that so many of these plays are obsessed with ghosts and the idea of something being visible without physical form, which is the experience of reading a play that you can't see. So I think there is therefore something like very satisfying about getting to bring this to the stage, partly because it feels like kind of realizing something about them, but also that there's a kind of communal aspect that I think is really important. That jumping off what you were saying about the body of the audience, like seeing the same thing rather than whereas we're imagining something and we're maybe imagining something a little bit differently by all watching the same performance. We're all watching the same performance and we experience that together. I think there is a real value in that, that maybe even more in our increasingly digital age than in 1800, perhaps we need.
No, I don't think that took us off track, Helen, at all. Thank you. Other thoughts from anyone along these lines? James, yeah.
Yeah, I can. A different kind of thought. One idea that was very helpful to me when trying to think about introducing past ways of thinking or past models for movement or so on to kind of contemporary practitioners was the idea of repertoire, and the idea that by studying these statues in particular, it would be expanding the repertoire of kind of possible movements or movements that would be available to an actor. Like the body learns a language just like our brains do, and seeing these different images and kind of thinking about the romantic repertoire not just as a kind of collection of plays, but a collection of potential bodily movements. Or like, so I did spend quite a while trying to find the Egyptian statue that Bowden was talking about and couldn't actually nail it down. So if anyone has any suggestions, please let me know. But like what your body can actually do, I think the past can push boundaries for that as well. But yeah, so additional thought on bodies.
Great, thank you. Any other thoughts? We do have another. Oh, sorry, go on, David.
No, I was just going to say that I think Helen and James have both given really good responses, so I'm happy to move on to other questions.
Well, that's great. We do have another question. I'm not sure if everyone can see the Q&A. Can everyone on the panel at least see questions that come in on that? Yeah, okay. Maybe I'll just read it aloud also for clarity. So there's a question here from Alex Gallagher. Thank you for a great roundtable. Can you say more about decisions made around staging, scenery, and costume when plays move from rehearsed reading to staged production, and the rationale behind choices and problematic aspects regarding staging and contemporary audiences? I think David sort of touched a little bit on that when you were talking about your performance and having the live body under the sheet, which I thought was quite interesting. But yes, maybe some more discussion around that sort of issue. That'd be great.
I mean, just one thing to say immediately is that the dream that I and so many of us share of moving from rehearsed reading to staged production is not yet a reality. That, it'd be wonderful for any one of the plays that we've been talking about to actually be taken up and given a kind of full run. But that the work of trying to persuade a company to take that kind of commercial risk is ongoing. So all I could speak about really is the specific context of rehearsed reading, or really as like in a scripted hand performance. I mean, I think is more accurate, certainly for the kind of work that I've been doing. And in that case, sometimes we do have some costumes, mainly to help an audience unfamiliar with the material to differentiate characters. And again, we might have some very basic props, simply for the sake of bringing as much clarity to bear upon the material as possible. But otherwise, it's very sparse. I mean, you can see from some of the photos I shared, and if you look at the recording, you'll see it, that it's really about tables and chairs. And I think, and I really want to, I say that, what I'm about to say, I want to preface by saying I would love to see these realised in full production. But there's just as James was talking about the kind of virtues of process, of the rehearsals, I think that the kind of rehearsed reading of the script and performance has its own virtues, in that one is that an audience are far more forgiving when actors have scripts in their hand and when they can see that something is slightly rough and ready. But another is that I think it distills certain elements that might be missed, as I was saying, to kind of distill certain gestural patterning that was going on in Bailey's play, that perhaps might be more easily missed once you start to add other layers and kind of visually elaborate the play in some way. So that'd be my answer, I suppose.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, no, go on, Emma.
No, please go for it.
Okay. Thank you. I just wanted to sort of off the back of what David was saying, that I, as I was sort of thinking about what I wanted to say and thinking about this, I like the merits of, or the benefits of approaching the play from the stage. I found myself thinking that there are some challenges to that, in that it's almost at odds with the other ideal, which is full-scale professional production that everyone can go and see. I stand out in that production that you saw as not being a professional actor among a big group of professional actors who made me feel very self-conscious, but were very nice to me all day. And I found myself thinking, I mean, one thing that we don't often really talk about in these spaces is, what about amateur drama groups? And I was thinking about James's work with amateur drama groups, and I think it was amazing to be bringing activities to them. But I wonder if there's a way of actually getting these productions into people's hands without requiring a big budget, by giving them to people to do. I also feel like that would be really valuable. Amateur theatre is a big part of the theatre of this time period as well. And I also wanted to jump on the other aspect of that question very quickly, which I think was asking about the kind of problematic material, which we found in the trial. This is just a very straightforward example, but there are a number of slurs in that play that are not intended to be so. They are very much Bailey not thinking about, I suppose, not thinking about the humanity. This is not me trying to defend her. This is more an explanation than a justification. Moments where she is not thinking about the humanity of Romani people, of people of color. And we kind of went through the script and went, right, like what is this trying to do? And how do we convey that without dehumanizing a group of people? What language can we substitute in place? And I think you probably wouldn't notice, to be honest, which I think is successful. But I can't speak to the experience of doing a play where you maybe do need to embrace the problematic elements, like where they actually serve more of a purpose than they did in the trial. Sorry, that's quite an incomplete answer, but...
Omar, did you want to come in? Yeah.
Yes. Alex, I think this is a great question. And I just wanted to say, based on the experiences that we're doing with Red Bull, that the limit of that, and this very much echoes what David was saying, is the limit is the dramatic reading. In our situation, we are bringing professional actors, we're bringing professional directors and a professional theater company to work with established actors on these texts. And if I told you how much we fundraise to make such a thing happen only for a rehearsed reading, a dramatic reading, you would be astounded. And so to go all the way to a full production is, as David said, just not yet realizable, unfortunately. However, I am encouraged by certain things, right? By the frequency with which we are bringing these plays into contact with such professional actors, someone like Roger Rees, for instance. And the actor that played King Sardanapalus, that was his second time playing that role. He wanted to play it again because he liked the character and the role so much. And I think he did such a great job. And what I want to say is that I think the more we try to do these kinds of activities, I think the more it is possible to make the staged, the full production happen. I think it's possible once these actors and theater artists become more aware of the possibilities of 18th and 19th century drama. And all this to also say, I think it's very valuable what Helen said. I think amateur acting is also very, very important and also a whole other portal for realizing very important things. Okay, thanks.
Great, thanks. James, did you have any thoughts along those lines?
Not really. I suppose, I think one thing I'm interested in is kind of these productions will only happen when there is a kind of an ecosystem around to support them. And I'm interested in kind of lots of bits of that ecosystem. So like, will the school children read Joanna Bailey when they do their Lambda acting exams kind of thing? Or like, I think the rehearsed readings are kind of proving the possibility that there's a whole kind of ecosystem there. Like, will the stage manager know what a romantic play is? Will the usher or the kind of programmer? So yeah, anyway, not much more to add.
No, that's great. It's a couple other questions in the Q&A, one from Maddie Callaghan and one from Leslie Peterson. I think they're kind of going in a similar direction. Maddie Callaghan writes, thanks for such wonderful talks. A couple of you talked about surprises generated by performances. Were there any surprises in terms of audience preference? Any authors, scholars didn't tend to discuss, but the audience adored? And Leslie, too, mentioning her participation in the trial at the Theatre Royal. I wonder if any of the speakers have thoughts about what might be learned from staging or rehearsing romantic plays in contemporary spaces. So I think those are both similar kinds of questions. I wondered if people had thoughts around anything to do with that, surprises around audience preference, things taken away from contemporary spaces and staging in those spaces. Omar, yeah.
I had a very simple thought, and thank you for these two excellent questions. So one of the reasons we're doing the Cenci this year, once again after so many years, is because the director of Red Bull Theatre loved it so much, and he wanted to do it again. And I had other plays I wanted to do, but we did that one specifically because of his preference, which is wonderful. And the same thing happened with Sardanapalus. That was the second time we brought it to the stage in 2024. In 2024, it was the second time. And so what surprised me is that and it's the same thing happened with The Woman Hater. Red Bull Theatre on their own, without any funding from our societies, brought The Woman Hater back as a dramatic reading on their own. And I think what surprised me is that these kinds of collaborations with professional theater companies are giving exposure to what is otherwise not canonical material for them. And I think giving them exposure opens up these possibilities that are surprising me. And I want to say once again, I just think we need to continue these kinds of collaborations because it helps in so many.
Other thoughts?
Yeah, I thank you for these questions. I just have Bailey on the brain, so I feel like I want to say for anyone who's sort of not familiar with Bailey's writings, one of the very fascinating things that she does is in her third volume of Plays on the Passions, she basically says, well, I have some doubts about publishing these because I don't think anyone performs my plays once I've published them. But then I don't think my plays can succeed in contemporary theatres because here are all the architectural reasons. Because theatre in the early 19th century was enormous. The Theatre Royal Covent Garden and Drury Lane were bigger than any theatre in either the West End or Broadway now. No one has a mic. You can't hear anything. That's an exaggeration, but like smaller spaces would be mic'd now. People at the back definitely can't hear. So one of the things weirdly that I sometimes feel is, well, what we get about bringing them to contemporary spaces is getting to experience them maybe more as Joanna Baillie intended. But then I was thinking about David's de Montfort production in a very small theatre space that feels like intimate and claustrophobic, but also it had this glass back, so it felt simultaneously very exposed. Those aren't things that were possible for Baillie, but we know because she wrote so much about what she thought a theatre might look like to work that she would probably have been quite excited by that. So that's a thought about that. In terms of Madeline's question about audience responses, I wanted to almost throw back to what David started with about this idea that the tragedy is not very good, because I think there's a really interesting division wherein no one wants to watch romantic tragedy, no one wants to analyze romantic comedy. Those are the scholarly and the audience reactions are really cleft. So it was quite interesting to get perspectives across genres in this roundtable, I guess. I have nothing more to say about that, but that was just a thought.
Any other thoughts about surprises, or do we want to tackle some other questions? No, so maybe just have my eye on the clock here. We've got another 10 minutes or so. So there is a more specific question for you, David, in the Q&A. Question about Inchbald's The Massacre, if anything in particular strikes him about the play as performance. And I wonder if that sort of, in a way, ties in with Matthew's nice question there as well, about if we had 30 seconds to pitch one romantic period play to the director of the National Theatre, what do you pitch and what is the pitch? So maybe something specific about The Massacre there, but then getting us thinking broadly about selling the romantic drama to contemporary audiences. David?
I might answer both questions very quickly. In answer to Enet's question, I think so the big takeaway from the performance of The Massacre was the way that reported action worked in performance. So for those of you who know the play, will know that Inchbald doesn't bring revolutionary violence onto the stage itself. In fact, our director, Tasha Rickman, compared it to a Greek tragedy and the kind of austerity of its spectacle. But what became really apparent is how much of the play we spend watching people undergo what is clearly trauma. So in the play, Euseb Trakistan, the kind of father of the family who is at the center of the play, he has escaped Paris where he's witnessed, utter horrors, the horrors of massacre. He's escaped, he's got back to his own town, he's got back to his own home. But it's clear, even though he's now here, he's still there. And so much of the play is about dealing with people who are still there, even though they're technically with us here, and that the way that trauma displaces people from in terms of a sense of their own presence. That was the big takeaway I think I had from the Massacre. My pitch, I'm going to answer to Matthew's question. My pitch, which is also an advert, is actually, I think, the great play of this period to move away from tragedies is, in fact, Elizabeth Inchbald's Wives as They Were and Maids as They Are. I think it's a genuinely astonishing play. I think it's the problem play of the 1790s. I think it's Measure for Measure in 1797, and the way that the play reveals this astonishing connection between different forms of patriarchal violence, and does so in a form that's simultaneously very funny and also very troubling. makes it just an astonishing achievement of a play. And I will post the link to the tickets for the Oxford production in a second in the chat. So there you are. You've got a pitch in a double sense.
Lovely. Other pitches?
I have to go for another Bailey play. It will be Bailey's Witchcraft, which is like if the Crucible were feminist. Like, what if everyone wasn't terrible and it was engaging with gendered and class dynamics and unsolvable issues with the legal system? It has a hot mess of an ending, but it's a masterpiece of a play otherwise. And we stage hot mess endings all the time, CF Cymbeline. So that's what I want. National Theatre, let's go.
Omar, yeah.
It's a really good question. I think there's something about name recognition, and I think people still know who Byron is. They do know, so there is something that could be done with a pitch. I do think Sardanapalus is probably his best drama, and I think there's a lot of dramaturgical potential in a play, and in that play, and I think with if I can just imagine an actual full production in which so much rehearsal is given and so much attention is given to the text and it's cut, I think it could actually be very, very productive. It would be very productive and provocative. I also think maybe there's something about Lover's Vows that could be pitched through its connection with Jane Austen. Again, going to my idea of name recognition. Yeah, but it's a great question, and I'd like to think further about it.
I feel I should say mine too. I'm going to follow Omar in that, you need name recognition. Sorry, Joanna Bailey, but I would go for Shelley's Prometheus Unbound and just throw the massive budget at it and huge cast, huge spectacle. Say hope till hope creates from its own wreck the thing it contemplates. Go full on, absolutely massive. The resource of the National Theatre, bankrupt the National Theatre. That would be my pitch.
Amazing. Thank you. And I can see a couple of things in the chat are just sort of going off and connecting. Just a note from Sarah Burdett that her and Diane Pachito are organizing virtual reading of Bailey's Family Legend, which in a way kind of answers Alex's question about the need for a revival of that. That is something to look forward to. Maybe we just have time for Alex's question, though, there about filming. He says that a few of you filmed your live readings and posted them on YouTube. I'm curious to know if any of you feel like there is potential in it or other new media as an alternative vehicle for production. Could Bailey or Byron feature in a kind of play of the day online, like the TV plays that were produced by the BBC in the 1950s? Could this be a way of increasing interest, or would this require a different way of thinking about acting and audience response?
I'm going to jump in very quickly because I think there's something to say here, which is it's something that we've been thinking about in the R18 Collective is about recording monologues, because monologues, there's some of these fantastic speeches in these plays. They are the kind of recorded monologues are the kind of thing that can circulate on TikTok or on Instagram. They are the kind of things that might have a better chance of going viral. They're also, therefore, the kinds of things that then actors might pick up as potentially good audition material. So that's one answer to the question.
It's funny, David. I pitched a book of monologues to Bloomsbury on the back of the Garrick book. And it's been very slow going. I can talk to you more about it if you want, about attempting to kind of get them into it. But yeah, monologues or things that fit kind of short form media, I think is short form digital media. So probably not kind of play of the day, but kind of here's your 30-second, 1 minute kind of clip or things. And so I was on that line, things like movement or gesture or stuff like that, would also be interesting, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, I fantasize every couple of months about having a career adapting 18th century plays for like 1 hour televised slots. So, me personally, yes, I think about this all the time, and I think it could be really satisfying. They're doing so much emotionally that I think that the close up would offer a lot. Um, but I don't want it to be just that. I kind of want an either or. I do think there's something really magical about live theatrical experience that I want to keep.
It's a good question, Alex, and thank you for being here. I'll put in a plug for the radio drama, which I know contradicts everything I just said, but I teach Manfred now to my non-majors with this wonderful radio drama of Manfred that the BBC did in 2017 for the Plays Bicentenary. And I just think that is a wonderful, low budget kind of way to bring out the value and beauties of close listening. Right. So, I mean, I know we've been talking so much about embodiment and the value of live performance. Of course, I subscribe to all of that. But there's also some benefit of just hearing the voice and the text spoken aloud. And I think the ideal is listening and looking and reading the text simultaneously, right? That multimedia experience simultaneously.
That's great. Thanks, everyone. I feel like we're just sort of warming to the subject now, but we